Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we wrap up your week with a glimpse back into what went on in the past week. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. Let's first look back using keywords. Japan as South Korea's cooperative partner. That's according to South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol during his speech marking Korea's 104th anniversary of the March 1st independence movement. The atypical comment came amid Seoul's latest push to soften sour bilateral ties, as the two nations have been trying to iron out much-noted historical disputes. The much-beloved South Korean alcoholic drink Soju made national headlines this week, not over its popularity or the launch of a new flavor, but instead over a planned price hike from around $5 to $6. Now, while the actual proposed increase was just under $1, to ordinary citizens and consumers, it was seen as something even more significant because of the reports of a price rise added to already exhausting high inflation here in the country. Tech firms from all around the world were in Barcelona this week to show off their newest telecom services and gadgets at the 2023 edition of Mobile World Congress. That includes South Korean tech giants like Samsung and KT, as well as small and medium-sized enterprises. China also made a comeback after being absent from CES, a rather calculated move to amplify its presence in the global market. It's been over 8 months since BTS dropped the announcement that they'll be taking a temporary pause from performing as a group. Still, it seems like their legacy as a group is carrying on, with their dynamite Lego sets being loved globally. J-Hope will join Jin in taking part in South Korea's mandatory military service. But before that, he released a solo album, On the Street. We have the latest on the members' solo artist lives. South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol built bridges during his speech commemorating the March 1st independence movement on Wednesday, highlighting his will for a future-oriented Seoul-Tokyo relationship. Our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung brings us the full report.
South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol defined Japan as a cooperative partner at the anniversary ceremony of the March 1st independence movement on Wednesday. The remark was welcomed by Japan. At a press conference in Tokyo on Wednesday, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirogatsu Matsuno echoed Yoon's sentiments, saying South Korea is an important neighbor that Japan should cooperate with on global issues. Despite Seoul and Tokyo's shared views on relations, however, a critical issue still remains unsolved: the compensation of Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. Seoul and Tokyo have recently been holding a series of high-level talks over this thorny issue, which is seen as one of the main reasons why relations soured between the two nations. Although no major breakthrough has been made so far, Seoul's foreign ministry says it will ramp up efforts.
In order to resolve the issue of forced labor, which is a major pending issue, the Korean government is listening to what the victims have to say and accelerating talks within various diplomatic levels of the foreign ministry in order to seek a reasonable solution.
Japan's financial newspaper, the Nikkei, reported that the Japanese Prime Minister should exercise his leadership and speed up discussions to resolve the issue. This comes as the paper said Yoon's speech has shown the willingness to mend ties, and therefore Japan should also consider what it can do. Rebutting criticism about the speech, an official from South Korea's presidential office stressed the key focus of Wednesday's remarks was to highlight the importance of bilateral cooperation in overcoming security and economic crises. The official also clarified that the message of the speech was clear in emphasizing that the government is focusing on taking a future-oriented path. Meanwhile, pundits are expecting there to be a Seoul-Tokyo summit sometime in March, but the foreign ministry stated that nothing has been decided as of now. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Soju is a much beloved and extremely popular Korean alcoholic drink here in the country due to its affordable price and accessibility. It's been making national headlines in recent weeks over the possibility of a price rise. To make a long story short, though, the price of soju won't be increased for now. Before we discuss the matter further, let's turn to our Jin for the background.
Soju has long been dubbed the alcoholic drink of the working class in Korea, where it's appreciated for its low price and accessibility. Having a significant part in local culture, this drink has become a daily necessity item alongside instant ramen noodles. But recent soju price hikes, driven by inflation, are adding to the burden for consumers, and the South Korean government has stepped up and launched an intensive probe into the whole industry. Since the financial crisis in 1998, annual inflation for alcoholic beverages has lingered below 2% most years, and in the few years where it reached the 4% range, consumers were left shocked. But a bottle of soju that commonly cost around 4,000 won in 2021 is now being sold for 6,000 won in many restaurants. Industry officials say the price of raw and subsidiary materials accounted for the price hike of nearly 6%, with the government pushing for cooperation by related industries to restrict price increases.
Soju prices reaching 6,000 won indicate severe psychological pressure on the working class.
Policies are important to stabilize prices, but cooperation between related industries is also needed.
The government has also launched a probe into the liquor industry to move against the average price of soju reaching 6,000 won at restaurants. The Ministry of Economy and Finance, the National Tax Service, as well as the Fair Trade Commission have already begun a series of meetings with industry officials to check whether the price hike is justified. According to government officials, the price of soju needs to be controlled, as it is more than just a bottle of alcohol, but is a product that is deeply embedded in the culture of daily life in South Korea. According to data, the average South Korean adult consumed 52.9 bottles of soju in 2022. 이은진, Arirang News.
The price rise was said to be less than $1, but this was not only seen as a burden, but rather another exhausting factor for ordinary citizens to deal with on top of already high inflation and soaring heating costs this winter. Plus, it was also worrisome that the planned tax hike came amid increases in the cost of raw materials, labor, shipping, and other production-related processes. The debate over the planned soju price rise quickly became a hot potato, so hot that the government stepped in to restrict price increases, leaving the liquor tax on soju products frozen this year. But increased expenses, especially those related to spirit prices and bottle production costs, could mean price hikes later this year. And it's not just the liquor industry that is walking on eggshells. Drinking water brands and companies that sell cooking oil and formula for babies have agreed not to raise in prices, saying it's a measure to lift the burden off of consumers amid high inflation. But the government indirectly putting pressure on firms that it will launch an investigation into the reasons for price rises may have also played a role. Nonetheless, a relief for consumers for now. In the meantime, the wage situation here in the country isn't getting any better. A recent finding shows the average monthly wage of workers rose slightly in 2021. But the growth was mostly driven by salary increases seen at large conglomerates. And the wage gap between male and female employees also remained evident. Let's turn to our Lee Soo-jin for more.
Average monthly wages have been rising in South Korea, but the income gap between workers at large companies and small and medium-sized enterprises has gotten wider. Data from Statistics Korea show that in 2021, the average monthly wage of office workers at companies of all sizes rose to 3.33 million won, up 4.1% from the year before. At the average rate that year, that's about $2,900. The average for workers at large conglomerates was 5.63 million won, up 6.6%. For employees at SMEs, however, it was 2.66 million, a rise of only 2.9%. Wage growth was the highest on record at large conglomerates and the lowest on record at SMEs. It's also the first time on record that the rate of income growth at large conglomerates was higher than at SMEs. By industry, the highest average income was in the financial sector at almost 7.26 million won. At the average rate that year, that's about $6,400. The lowest average income was in the hospitality sector, such as lodging and restaurants, at 1.62 million.
There also remained a substantial wage gap between men and women. Men made on average 1.5 times that earned by women. Men made nearly 3.8 million won a month, up 4.7% from a year earlier, while women made 2.56 million and saw a gain of 3.7%. The gender wage gap is widely expected to continue.
There are a lot of instances where women leave the workforce, so it's not only important for women to get employed in the first place, but to continue working.
The expert added that in order for the gender wage gap to close, companies need to focus on keeping women in the workforce. 이수진, Arirang News.
Moving on to updates on the country's exports, more red signs spotted. South Korea logged yet another trade deficit last month, recording a full year of imports outweighing exports. Weak demand for the country's key export item chips and a rise in energy imports were to blame.
Yet another grim economic figure coming out of South Korea's trade sector. Data from the Trade Ministry on Wednesday shows that South Korea posted a trade deficit for 12 months straight in February. That is the longest streak since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. It's mainly due to the country's falling exports, which fell for the fifth consecutive month in February. Outbound shipments fell 7.5% on year to just over $50 billion last month. The ministry attributed this to weak global demand for chips amid an economic slowdown. In fact, exports of semiconductors, the country's key export item, plunged over 42% last month on falling demand and a drop in chip prices. It also marks a seventh straight month of falling chip exports. Imports, meanwhile, rose 3.6% on year to $55.4 billion in February on growing energy imports. The country's energy imports surged almost 20% on year last month amid the cold weather. South Korea relies heavily on imports for its energy needs. Taking into account decreasing exports and increasing imports, South Korea logged a trade deficit of $5.3 billion last month. The Trade Ministry last month forecast a 4.5% decline in exports this year. Despite such a depressing projection, the South Korean government has set an export target of $685 billion for this year, up 0.2% from last year's total. This came as President Yoon Suk Yeol called on all ministries to focus on promoting exports and winning overseas contracts in 12 key sectors, including nuclear power, arms, overseas construction, and agriculture. 신세벽, Arirang News.
The world's biggest telecom event, the Mobile World Congress, returned to Barcelona this week. Our Shin Ha-young tells us what South Korean communications giants had to offer.
The world's biggest telecom fair in Barcelona was all about AI, fueled by the ChatGPT craze, and 5G with a hint of 6G too. The 4-day MWC 23 opened under the theme of Velocity, unleashing tomorrow's technology today. Participants weren't limited to mobile technology, with 5G acceleration, fintech, OpenNet, Reality Plus, and digital everything all key themes of the exhibition. And at the event, one of South Korea's biggest wireless telecommunications operators, SK Telecom, introduced the company's developments in AI, urban air mobility, 6G, and the metaverse. Under the theme of AI, the wave of innovation, visitors to SK's booth were able to experience flying cars and AI-based robots in person.
Our new strategy, AI to Everywhere, aims to create AI that connects with the world, without being monopolized or biased towards a single company.
Another South Korean mobile carrier, KT, presented a solution to increase the efficiency of AI logistics center operations. South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics had its Galaxy S23 series and Galaxy Book 3 Ultra on display. It also showcased its 5G network technology. Small and medium-sized firms also participated in the event, helped by South Korea's Trade Investment Promotion Agency, COOPERATIve. Most of those businesses specialize in digitalization and virtual reality.
One of the startups that grabbed attention is XL8, which has developed AI translation technology in collaboration with Netflix.
China was absent from CES 2023 in January, but at MWC 23, 150 Chinese firms joined, with tech giant Huawei having the biggest presence. Huawei showcased its new flagship Mate 50 series. Meanwhile, the US had one of the most popular booths, with Microsoft introducing an update to its Bing search engine combined with ChatGPT. Apart from new hardware and technology, network usage fees were under the spotlight amid calls for content providers to share the burden of costs. Netflix co-CEO Greg Peters argued that the company doesn't want to be forced to pay network costs, warning that content will suffer if it's forced to do so. His remarks came after Thierry Breton, the EU Commissioner, stressed the need for a financing model for network investment. 신하영, Arirang News.
It's no surprise that South Korea's tech giants took the spotlight with their newest, most advanced gadgets at the global tech events. But this year's MWC was a bit different. China was absent from the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January, citing Washington-Beijing tensions and COVID-19 quarantine measures as reasons. Instead, Chinese firms came back to the European event to take the center stage at MWC, setting up booths that were 5 times bigger than Samsung Electronics. In fact, a return to the MWC appeared to be a strategically good decision, as it was a good chance for their latest smartphones to shine, as Samsung Electronics' Galaxy S23 series had already been unveiled in January. Like our Shin-Young said, Huawei showed off its new flagship Mate 50 series. Xiaomi took aim at Samsung with its foldable phone, the Xiaomi 13 series. China's smartphone makers have been mainly selling their phones locally, due in part to a shortage of components, but their gadgets will now be available worldwide, signaling a grand entrance into the global market. Some big announcements for K-pop fans this week, with BTS center of attention. From a surprise announcement on joining the military to releasing a solo album. In light of this, for this edition of Weekly Focus, we'll look back at what the boys have been up to since they announced a hiatus as a group. We turn to our culture correspondent, Song Yujin. Welcome, Yujin.
Thank you for having me, Dami.
Sure. Let's start with the latest. This week, we saw all 7 BTS members reconvene for the first time in over 8 months, right?
You're right, Dami, but the boys, they're actually back in breaks. The multinational company Lego released its BTS Dynamite set. It's modeled on the music video set of Dynamite, the group's Grammy-nominated song, and includes minifigures of all 7 members. But the set is only being sold currently in certain countries, including South Korea, the United States, Australia, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. But despite a purchase limit of 1 per person, it took less than 30 minutes for the set to go on back order in the United States. But for those who still want to buy it, it's still available for purchase in South Korea, the UK, and some countries in Europe as of Friday morning Korea time. But you may need to hurry if you want your BTS Dynamite Lego set.
Right. Now then, sold out within 30 minutes in the US. Tell us about the significance of the sold out of stock performance. Ever since Lego announced its collaboration with BTS, both domestic and foreign media outlets have been buzzing about the news, right?
You're definitely right, Dami, and that's because over the past several years, we've been seeing BTS bringing huge benefits, billions of dollars to the Korean economy through their tours, merchandise, and endorsements. And this Lego deal is actually one of the first major collaborations after the group announced that they were taking a break as a group. So many were really waiting to see whether this partnership would turn out to be as fruitful as before. For example, the Wall Street Journal wrote that this collaboration will test BTS's strong influence and marketability. But as of now, by looking at how the Lego set went out of stock so fast and how BTS Lego pop-up stores are opening across Korea from this week, the group still seems to be standing strong.
Right. It's not just Lego sales. It looks like solo actor members still show how much of an impact that BTS as a group still shows on mass media. Now, talking about solo act, Jin, the oldest member of the BTS, began his military service last December. And I hear we have another member joining him pretty soon.
You're right, Dami. Last Sunday, the group's label HYBE announced that a second member to BTS, J-Hope, he has begun his military enlistment process by terminating his enlistment postponement. And what this means is that J-Hope can be called to the military anytime. In South Korea, almost all able-bodied men are required to serve in the military by the time they are 28. But in 2020, the National Assembly passed a bill allowing K-pop artists to defer their service until the age of 30. J-Hope is currently 29 years old, so we don't really know where he'll serve yet at this moment. That will be decided after J-Hope finishes his 5-week basic military service. But we at least know that member Jin, who started his service last December, as you mentioned, he's currently serving at the Yeoncheon area in the Gyeonggi-do province of South Korea.
Right. I watched it live when he was enlisted, and now it feels so soon. It's been just over 2 months since Jin joined the military, and now it's J-Hope, right?
Right. I was definitely shocked and a little bit sad about the announcement as well, because we won't be able to see J-Hope's successful music career for at least a year and a half. But the good news is that the artist himself promised his fans that he is preparing a lot before he goes off to the military. And actually, the first announcement was made, and it took place this week. J-Hope just released his new solo single named On the Street on Friday, March 3rd. And J-Hope's solo career has been really successful so far. His first solo album named Jack in the Box was released last July and actually reached #1 on the iTunes top album charts in 49 countries. And last August, he became the first Korean musician to take the main stage as a headliner at the Lollapalooza, which is a very famous annual 4-day music festival that was held in Chicago.
I'm also looking forward to what J-Hope is preparing for the army, not the military, but for fans. I'm sure he has a lot to prepare for the enlistment too. But other BTS members have also embarked on their individual journeys as solo artists. So let's talk about that.
Well, right. To talk about the latest, we have another solo album coming from another BTS member just this month. Member Jimin is finally making his long-awaited solo debut after more than 9 months since he started his musical career as a group. Jimin's album Face will be released on March 24th, and also a solo world tour from another member is on the way too. The group's rapper Suga will be the first member to go on a solo world tour, which will start in late April in the United States and then in Asia. And it's not just music that the boys are showing their presence as individual members. For example, member V is currently starring in the Korean reality show named Ginny's Kitchen, where all the cast members, they're running a Korean restaurant overseas in Mexico.
Right, we're just into 2 months of the year, a lot going on individually. But it's not just this year. Other members successfully kicked off their solo journeys last year too, right?
Right. So looking back on last year, the group's leader, RM, he dropped his first solo album, Indigo, last December, and he saw great success thanks to this album. This album actually made RM the first Korean solo artist to rank 3rd on the mainstream Billboard 200 chart, and also member Jungkook's 2022 Qatar World Cup official song Dreamers, which he performed at the opening ceremony, is the longest charting solo song by a Korean soloist on Spotify's global chart. And even Jin, who is currently doing his military service, set a new record just last month in February, making American social media analytics company NetBase Quid's top 10 artists mentioned in social media list for 20 straight months, which is almost 2 years. Jin's solo single, The Astronaut, released last December, has been also climbing up the charts and is at the top spot of music identification app Shazam's global top 200 from late February. So although BTS's legacy as a group may be on pause for now, the boys are still starting their new chapters, their new individual solo careers, each with their own colors.
Different locations, beats, and journeys that the boys have chosen to go on, still just as thriving and shiny as before.
Right.
Looking forward to what amazing beats the boys will continue to achieve on.
Me too.
All right, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dami.
That is all we have for you this week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.